The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
On behalf of RBCS and software test professionals, welcome to this webinar on why testing is a good career. I am Rex Black, president of RBCS, a worldwide testing and quality assurance firm serving clients ranging from small startups to Fortune 20 global enterprises. Since 1994, RBCS has delivered insight and confidence to hundreds of clients around the world. We have a team of international consultants that deliver customized training, consulting, and outsourcing services for companies that are looking to improve their test and quality assurance practices. I am the author of 12 books on software testing, including the bestseller Managing the Testing Process, and 4 books on the ISTQB program. RBCS is presenting this webinar in partnership with Software Test Professionals. Check out their website at www.softwaretestpro.com. Attending today's webinar may earn you credit for QAI and ASQ recertification. Check with QAI or ASQ to determine how to qualify. It typically involves saving the attendee email that you'll receive after this webinar. Attendance at today's webinar also earns PMI PDUs. I would like to thank Mike Lindhorst for reviewing the materials for PDU status and for making valuable suggestions. Attendees will receive an email telling them how to claim PDUs, including the PDU code. Before we start the presentation, a couple housekeeping notes. Feel free to submit questions at any time, but please note that I will only look at them at the end. You do not need to ask for presentation copies, though I guarantee you somebody will. The presentation is already posted on the web, www.rbcs-us.com. Go to the Resources tab in the upper middle and then navigate from there to the basic library, and you will find PDF versions of the slides. Also, by attending this webinar, you have automatically been registered for the free e-learning drawing. Check your email over the next couple days and watch the spam filter. If you're having problems with either the audio or visual components of this webinar, please contact GoToWebinar support. These problems are usually related to browser incompatibility issues, company firewalls, and audio settings on the PC that you're trying to use, so I would start with those. I hope you enjoy this free webinar from RBCS. We do these free webinars as a service to the software testing community because at RBCS we are a not just for-profit company. But today's presentation is on why testing makes a good career. And it's really aimed more at people who are either interested in being testers or testers who are looking for ways to convince people to become testers. It's sort of an outreach kind of thing. We need more testers, as I pointed out in a recent webinar. The IT industry is underinvesting in testing by my calculations by about a factor of 8. In other words, as an industry, IT should spend about 8 times more on testing than it actually does. That was in the last month's webinar. But part of that, of course, would be attracting more testers and more qualified, motivated testers. So we'll look at ammunition that you can use to do that recruiting, if you will. So it's amazing that an invention that is effectively only about 70 years old, 60 to 70 years old, has become completely indispensable. Excuse me. Software is just everywhere. You have a smartphone, most people do. I use it to find restaurants where I'm going to eat out when I'm on the road. It's not just a phone. It allows me to do all sorts of things. Software basically controls most cars and airplanes, and it even controls elevators. So you're riding along in an elevator, and you might not realize this, but it's probably software controlled. Of course, there's video games. There's if you're scuba diving, there's scuba diving computers that help you avoid getting the bends. Of course, there's all sorts of social media and email, and it's just absolutely everywhere. And that means that software quality problems are everywhere, and everybody gets nailed by them to a greater or lesser extent. So pretty much our entire life at this point is going to be influenced by the quality or lack thereof of the software that's controlling all of these things that we are using. And at this point, testing is still an essential part of how software is delivered in a quality state. Now, we could say that, well, at some point or another, when software engineering has evolved into true engineering, then the number of defects will go down precipitously, and it won't be necessary to test a bunch of bugs out at the end of the process. And I would agree that that's the end state, but I would also say that we're probably a long way away from that end state. And even in situations where things are engineered, you still have testing that's involved. So testing is critical and likely to remain critical as for the rest of the 21st century, or at least that part of the 21st century that precedes when software engineering becomes a true engineering field. But it's hard to see that happening anytime in the next 50 years, which means that we're probably going to continue to need a lot of software testers from the duration of a typical person's career. So it's a safe and good choice to make. You're not going to be obsoleted by the any revolutions in the way that software is built, representations by some fad promoters to the contrary. Every fad that has been put out as the thing that's going to quote-unquote solve the software quality problem has turned out not to solve it. So testing is a reliable way to make a living. So by software testing, what I'm talking about here is evaluation of both functional and non-functional aspects of the software. So is it accurate? Does it give the right answers? Does it actually solve the user's problem? Does it do it securely? Does it do it quickly? Does it do it reliably? Those are all things that testers can be involved in. There's also a lot of structural aspects. That's the rise of a lot of these Agile methods and the tools that have gone along with them, the renewed interest in things like white box testing and code coverage analysis and structural code, static code analysis, and that's also something that can be involved in software testing. So there's a wide variety of activities that we can be involved in as testers, and thus there's a lot of things to learn, a lot of things to know. Now, it's important that we have well-defined objectives for our testing, and these are things that I have mentioned before. The typical objectives of testing would be to find defects, especially the more important ones. The finding of defects is, of course, one of the most obvious of the objectives of testing, but it's important not to get carried away with it too. We need to make sure that we don't just say, well, I want to find as many defects as I can, and it's better to find a larger percentage of the more important defects than to find just a large number of defects. Confidence building is also something that most organizations are looking for out of their testing. Make sure that before we put something into production, it has been thoroughly checked out, and it's related to, in some sense, the finding of the important defects. Organizations want to go live with a product that they can have confidence in. To give you an example of the absence of that, one of my clients, I found that when they went into production, they would have what they called a war room of their smartest tech people that had worked on the product. And these people would be on a rotating basis, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for the first at least week, and sometimes 2 weeks in this war room. There'd be somebody in there, and there was basically, something went wrong, then they would get the call, and they'd have to jump in there and actually fix the applications live in production. And they sort of thought that this was just how things worked. And I said, well, no, actually, this is not typically how things work. I said, for most of our clients, when an end of a project comes and they release a product, they have a project team dinner or a party or something like that, and maybe they give out T-shirts, and then everybody goes home and sees their family again for a while, and you're not losing sleep because you have confidence that you did things the right way. So confidence building is an important part of software testing. Reducing risk. There's always some level of risk associated with software that will continue to be the case regardless of how it's built, but it's especially true now given the fact that software does tend to come to the testers with such a large number of defects. So as we find defects, as defects get fixed, as we cover more and more of the product's features and supported configurations and known quality risks and so forth, the overall level of risk goes down. There are ways to measure that, which I've discussed in other webinars, and when that has reached an acceptable level, then a smart release decision can occur. And overarching all three of these previous objectives is the objective of giving stakeholders the information that they need about defects, about the level of confidence, about the level of risk, so that they can make smart decisions. They can make fully informed decisions. Can we go into production now? Yes or no? What's the risk of going into production? So testing is very important, both from a tactical perspective within the project as well as a strategic perspective supporting decision making on the project. Now, there will always be testing done by developers. Well, it should be. There should be unit testing. And user acceptance testing is often done by users. Beta testing is done by customers. So there are plenty of different people who are involved in software testing, but the most critical people, the most important people, are the professional software testers. People who have been trained as testers, who see it as a specialty, as a profession, who are focused on it, and hopefully spend their entire career working as software testers. So rather than seeing testing as a way to get your foot in the door at a company so that you can, as quickly as possible, move on to doing something else, testing should be seen as a long-term career prospect. Because without that, without a testing career path, you're not going to have truly professional software testers. There's going to be very little interest in software, in people involved in testing doing, enhancing their skills and getting better at doing software testing, unless there is some sort of career path there. So that's really one of my main concerns here in this presentation, why I thought this would be important to get across, is that we have to have that career path and retain people within the testing profession, rather than having it be a transit point that people go through on their way to doing what they really want to do when they grow up. As I said, there's definitely not enough software testing going on. Based on a cost quality analysis that, as I mentioned, that I talked about in last month's webinar about whether testing is a waste of time and money, the IT industry as a whole is under-investing in testing by at least a factor of 8. And I'd refer you to the recorded version of that webinar if you want to see the exact analysis on that. And that's just based on purely economic considerations. Not only is there economic issues, but we're, as a profession, releasing way too much software with way too many bugs. And it's costing people money, it's inconveniencing them, and in some cases, killing people. There's a notable incident that happened a few years back that some of you may have heard me mention before, where an elevator, software-controlled elevator in a hospital, ironically enough, had a bug in its software, and there was a doctor who tried to catch the elevator as the door was closing, and basically half of him caught the elevator. The door wasn't closed. The floor started moving. That's never supposed to happen, and it ended up killing this guy. So this is, an extreme case, but it is not unheard of for software to be the cause or a major contributing factor in situations where there are injury and death. So definitely it's not just an economic issue that we're not testing enough, but it certainly is an economic issue. Ironically enough, the reason that this presentation came to exist is, at least when it did, was that I was on an airplane on a transatlantic flight, and what I usually do on long airplane rides is just catch up on all the movies I haven't seen. But instead, I got to write this presentation because the entire airplane's entertainment system crashed and could not be brought back up. So I guess this is kind of my revenge on the under-tested entertainment system software. So put a call out to get more testers. They definitely needed more testing of that entertainment system, and that's been true of pretty much every airline that I've been on. Is that I don't think I've ever had a transatlantic or transpacific flight where I was on an airplane and the entertainment system worked flawlessly for everybody. Next time you're on a plane that does long haul flights, ask the flight attendants how they feel about the in-seat entertainment systems, and they'll have choice words for you. They are notoriously unreliable, and the flight attendants end up being the brunt of that. So we definitely need more. We need better software, and we need more software testing, which means we need more software testers. It's not like we have software testers right now who don't have enough to do. Now, for those people who say, well, testing, is it really going to be around? As I said, until software engineering becomes a true form of engineering, we're going to need testers, and probably even beyond. Now, people say from time to time that testing is going to go away. There was Kent Beck at a software quality conference in San Francisco in 1999 who was talking about agile methodologies, and basically said, well, we're not going to need testers anymore. I believe that the phrase that was used was dinosaurs. We're still here. We also have our friend and bomb thrower, James Whitaker, who is an author of testing books and was at one point a tester. Maybe he's now a tester again. He said at a keynote speech at some sort of conference that testing is dead. Well, if testing is dead, how do you square that with the fact that you look at the ISTQB program, which I'm involved in, the numbers continue to go up exponentially every year. We're in an exponential growth curve. We surpassed 300,000 recently in the last little over 10 years, but it's certainly a lot more than 30,000 a year being certified now. Even if you look at the average over all 10 or 12 years that the program is in place, it's about 30,000, but it's a lot more than that per year now. So if testing is such an unattractive thing to do, then why would people continue to get certified in it? Now, how long have independent testers been around? Well, the first thing that I can find, the first publication that I can find that mentions independent testers is the Mythical Man Month, which Fred Brooks wrote about his adventures in software project management at IBM in the 1960s. And if you are a test manager or intend to be a manager at some point in your career in the software business, I highly encourage you to read this book. It is absolutely one of the classics, and even though it was written all those years ago, anybody who reads it today will still find that almost all of the material in there is applicable, other than there's a brief discussion about managing memory, which was a big problem back when there wasn't a lot of it. But other than that, it's all applicable. And then Fred, in his book, did talk about the need to have independent testers, and the need to have independent testers to review the requirement specifications. So they apparently had a fairly mature practice even back then, because some of our clients, the testers don't review the requirement specifications. So you learn a thing or two about how to do testing the right way by looking at the ideas that came out of IBM in the 60s and 70s. So testing has been around a while, and testing is certainly going to be around into the future. Now, I was doing an assessment once for a client, and I asked whether the testers should get a deeper understanding of the individual systems. And this was at a bank, and they had, probably about 50 or so different applications in their data center. And one of the things that I was exploring was whether they had adequate knowledge of each system, given that large number. And one of the development managers said, no, I don't want the testers to have a better understanding of the individual systems, because then they will lose focus on how they all work together. He went on to add that they were the test team was the only team of people who really had a good understanding of how everything worked and how it functioned as a complex system of systems. And he said that was definitely one of the more valuable things about the test team, being that repository of global knowledge, and he wanted that to continue. And if you think about it, makes sense. You have programmers and architects that are generally going to be focused on one application, or maybe even just a part of an application. And there might be very few people within the organization who have a complete understanding of even a single application. And that means that overall big picture perspective is going to be very valuable. That's a very, very valuable resource. Now, specialization is not, I'm not looking down on specialization saying, well, it's boring to be specialized. Certainly even within testing there can be specialization, like with respect to test automation and white box types of testing and other forms of tools use. But one of the things that can be very interesting to people is that ability to see all the different applications, all the different technologies, all the different business problems that are present and being dealt with in the data center, and having that global view. It's almost like the sort of the CIO perspective in some ways, and you could argue maybe that the logical path up to be a CIO would be through the testing career path, because you'd have that broad perspective right from the beginning of your career. Okay, so now, as I said, we continue to see exponential growth in the number of certified testers. See this growth trend over time, and how it is trending up steeply. You notice that it starts in 2006, and the ISTQB was actually around. The program that spun off into the ISTQB was really around since 1999. So you had about 6 years that aren't shown here to get to 25,000, and then now the next 6 years it's up over 300,000 now. So it's really an amazing growth path. And of course, not every tester is certified. So there's probably still a fairly sizable number of testers who have not gone through the program yet. So that's, that when I'm not even implying, oh, that's the total number of testers. The total number of testers is way above that, because based on Forrester report, there's $50 billion in annual software test spending worldwide. So, do the math, that translates into a pretty large number of testers. So testing is relevant and essential. Automation, test automation, agile lifecycles, and the like have not made testing less important. Now, testing is something that delivers real and measurable value to the business, to the organization that it's done for. So if we take the sort of standard economic definition of return on investment, ROI, you get the net benefit of the activity and divided by the cost of the activity. The testing can be shown to save well more money than it costs. The technique that you can use to do this is called cost of quality. I've got numerous articles and such on the RBCS website that discuss this. Just look for articles with the word ROI, or the phrase return on investment in the title. You'll see how this is done. We've used this technique with a number of our clients, and the low-end return on investment that I found, lowest amount was 200%, and the highest was 3,200. So in other words, every dollar spent on testing saves the organization, based on the organizations I've looked at least $2 net and as much as $32 net. And that's just a tremendous amount of savings. You think about that. This is not just like some marginally beneficial activity that saves 10, 20, or 30%. And, think of it. If you went to a CIO or CEO in any organization and said, I have a surefire way to save you 50% on a particular category of costs, which that category of costs accounts for anywhere from 10 to 25% of the IT budget, you would have that person jumping at it, right? So how much more so should people really jump at testing, given that it's not just saving 10, 20, 30%, but in the hundreds of percentages. And these figures are not, it's not just me. There have been other studies that have been done using cost of quality, looking at software and software testing. A fellow named David Rico did a study for the Department of Defense, and what he found was that every dollar spent on testing saves $8 on average net savings after deducting the cost of the dollar. So that's 800% return on investment. So testing is just a real serious bargain for the kind of savings that it gives you. And keep in mind that what we're talking about here is cost reduction. Cost reductions go straight to the bottom line. You improve productivity, that's one thing, but when you are able to cut costs, then that goes straight through to the bottom line in an organization. Now, one of the things that makes this a particularly great time to be a tester is that there's a thing that project management talks about, where they talk about the formation of a team, and there's 4 steps, they say, or 4 stages. There's the forming, storming, norming, and performing. The forming is the initial formation. The storming is the arguments and discussions and kind of hashing around trying to figure out what to do. the norming is coming to a consensus, and then performing is actually getting traction and working. And I think we could say that the same pattern seems to be playing out in our profession now, in software testing as a profession. So we're just coming out of the storming, I think, and you know, that's starting to taper off. There are still some people who are, say, outliers in terms of how they think testing ought to be practiced, but you know, for the most part, what we're seeing is across all the different test certifications, and even outside of certification, like if you look at Kem Kainer's black box software testing, and this is, you know, coming from Kem, has not historically been particularly pro certification. There's a lot of common ground on what we think should be part of the testing profession, the skills that people have. So while there's still a lot to learn, you know, we are entered that norming period now. They're really, the next 25 years are really going to be key to getting the profession defined. So this is a great time to be involved. You know, there's so much to learn, and yet at the same time, we've got a solid foundation to work from, which, you know, was not true in the 60s and 70s. You know, Fred Brooks and the other folks at IBM, where they were really literally having to make all this stuff up as they went along, and you know, they got a lot of it right, and they got some of it wrong. Now we're at the point where we're really getting to see this convergence, and we're going to really start to enter that performing stage. I think about 20 years from now. Some of us won't be still in the profession. At least I hope I'm not actually having to work in 20 years. But you know, people who enter the profession now will, I think, see that period. And so basically what we're doing is we're establishing a profession, and that makes it a particularly interesting time to be in software engineering in general and software testing in particular. I gave a webinar on this a few months ago, which you can find the recorded version of it on my website. And in it, I looked at the real contrast between some well-established forms of engineering, like civil engineering, mechanical engineering, and even aeronautical engineering, which, you know, they have, there's math behind the engineering and the way it works. There's a solid science on it. There are engineering materials, standardized engineering materials that are used to build things. We don't have that yet in software engineering. But we're going there. We're headed in that direction. You can see signs of it. So, you know, I'm thinking that the true software engineering profession, true engineering, was probably, you know, end of the 21st century. It would be about the time we would get there. So this is a great time to be involved in software engineering just in general. So even if someone's saying, well, you know, I don't want to be a tester, it's certainly a very interesting time to be a software engineer. And one of the stereotypes that gets leveled at the STEM professions is the science, technology, engineering, and math professions is, well, it's just, you know, a bunch of geeky boys, and, you know, they've got pocket protectors and, you know, and a bunch of very odd interests. And, you know, you'll find a few people like that, I have to admit. But if you look at testing relative to other forms of software engineering jobs, it actually has a higher percentage of women than any of the others. Now, it's still relatively off balance, but it's a much more balanced and diverse cadre, if you will, than say, I'm going to get myself in trouble here by saying that programming in general might be less diverse. But I mean, if you look at enrollment numbers in the STEM programs in colleges, they are, you know, very much skewed towards men. versus software testing field, which certainly has plenty of representation of women. So you could say that, well, does this necessarily mean that it's just geeky boys and girls? So depends on what you mean by geek. You've got one guy I know who's a software tester, is a part-time movie actor when he gets roles. I knew another fellow who was a software tester who was a amateur bodybuilder, and I think you probably wouldn't see this guy and think he was a geek. At least you wouldn't call him a geek, because he might snap you in half. So, I think that stereotype of the geeky boys club is not applicable to people in software testing. I just got a funny look from my business partner here. I'm not sure what she was trying to imply by that. But, okay, so some conclusions here. Software testing is a profession. We can start to point to what the standard body of knowledge is for that profession. As I said, we've got convergence starting to happen across the different testing certifications, and also looking even outside of the certifications, looking at people who've traditionally not been pro certification, tend to agree on the fundamental elements of the software testing profession, the kind of techniques that we need to use. There are certainly plenty of them. There are a lot of different things that we can test. As I said, you can do functional testing and non-functional testing, and white box testing. You can do testing manually. You can use all sorts of different tools. Testing exists to serve a number of objectives within an organization, and part of test management is getting your head around what those objectives are, working closely with the other stakeholders to define those objectives and to measure your ability to achieve them. And testing has a strong business case. It's not something where you have to kind of say, well, I have this job, I do this job, and I don't know really how much value I'm adding. It's clearly a very valuable activity with a very high return on investment that can be measured using techniques that are very well established. Cost of quality is not a fly-by-night marginal technique, some sort of realm of tinfoil-hatted iconoclasts. Cost of quality is something that's been around at least since the 50s, and it's popularized by no less a hero of the quality movement than James Duran. So, it's certainly a well-established technique that we can use to demonstrate our value. And we definitely need more testers. As I said, we are under testing as an industry, and we need more testers to get involved. And we need to increase the level of professionalism of those testers. So it's still the case that you can find people who are paid testers who make a living doing software testing, that if you showed them a input screen and the description of the fields on those screens and the valid and invalid values, and told them use equivalence partitioning and boundary value analysis to construct a set of input validation tests for this screen, would not know how to do that. And that's just a basic entry-level functional tester kind of task that really everybody should know how to do. So, that's raising the level of professionalism. So there's just a basic assumption that we can make about things that people will know, I think, is very important, and it is something that we are seeing happen. Testing has been around a while, as I said, at least since the 60s, and every prediction of the demise of software testing has proven to be ill-founded at best. If anything, it's growing, and it's a very diverse group that does testing in a lot of different ways, culturally diverse, It's got good gender diversity. It is attracts people with a variety of interests, in many cases going beyond technology to people interested in other areas. So it's, you can have some very interesting conversations about things not at all technically related with your fellow testers at conferences if you go. So we're a growing group, converging on a set of known best practices that we now are knowing how to apply, and the future definitely looks bright for the profession. So that's my quick little pitch on why testing is a great career here. I wanted to keep it kind of short so that you can point people to it and say, hey, go check this out. It'll only take you about a half an hour and listen through the core of the thing. It's going to be posted on our website as always. I'm going to undock the Q&A panel here, and we'll go into the question and answer period. Happy to take questions. Here's some questions about the slides and the recording. So again, the slides are you go to rbcs-us.com, go to the resources tab, and then from there you can get to the basic library and also the digital library. So the basic library is where the PDF version of the slides are. The digital library is where the recording is going to be, and that recording will be on there. Usually it's posted within a week. One person mentioned that the audio was cutting out. Apparently that's not an ongoing problem because there was only one comment on that. That can sometimes be a connectivity issue if you if either from my end or from your end, if the connectivity gets slow somewhere along the way or dropped, it can cause that cutting in or out. So, and Gina asks, how important are ISTQB qualifications in a tester career? And then it says, how can, and it leaves off. So, the certifications, I've been involved in that program for a number of years now, closing in on 10 years. And so I think this is something that's important. I think that the certification is part of how we establish a profession and how we set a common understanding of how what people need to know at each point in their career. And this is especially what I like about the ISTQB program, is that it does establish a career path starting at the entry level with the foundation, moving up to the advanced, and then moving from there to the expert. So it really supports the tester throughout their career path, and I think that's very important. I'm certainly not going to say we have it all figured out, and the ISTQB program is perfect. There are mistakes in it. There are things that we know that we need to do better, but we are constantly working on doing better, and so I think that it's a good guide to look at to improve your career. Kembley asks, do you think testers are being replaced by developers that can create automated testing to the applications they develop? Should testers now become developers to survive? Well, unit testing is important, and developers writing automated unit tests is clearly a best practice. That would be great if all project teams had it. But the thing to keep in mind about unit testing is that there are plenty of bugs that you simply cannot be found using a unit test. And according to Capers-Jones's studies, the bug finding effectiveness of unit testing tops out at around 50%. This compares rather poorly with the bug finding capability of independent test teams, which my associates and I have measured during assessments at around 85%, and some of them are as high as 99%. whereas the typical unit test is around 25% defect detection effectiveness. So, it would be unwise, to say the least, for organizations to decide, well, a developer writing automated unit tests for their code is a perfectly good replacement for an independent professional tester doing testing of that code that looks at it from a lot of different angles. Now, to the issue of whether testers should become developers, all trends indicate that testing is going to become a much more technical field on the whole over the next few years. This is being driven in large part by the movement towards Agile methodologies, where there are simply a lot of automated tools there. So I believe that testers would be very wise to learn how to program in whatever language is being used on their particular projects, and then start to learn how to do automation. You could do it in the other order, but it's going to be a lot easier for you to learn the automated tools if you already know how to program. If you like me and you got a computer science degree, you're in luck because you already have that computer programming knowledge. But if you don't, take that step for your career and learn how to program, as I said, in the language that you're using on your projects, and then start to explore those different tools, and not just the tools that are used for functional testing, like say Selenium or Quick Test Pro, but also looking at tools that are used for things like static code analysis. And for example, there's a Sonar tool set, unit testing tools like JUnit, scripting tools like Ruby or Perl. All of these things are going to be really, really valuable to you throughout your career. That you know how to do that, and it also is going to help you in terms of getting and keeping the respect of developers. You're going to be able to communicate to them in their own language, and that will definitely help out that ability to communicate with developers in the technical terms that they think in. Robert posted a question with no question. It's just blank. So if you want to repost that, I'll answer it. So Nicholas says, PMI exists to unite and to establish standards for project managers. IIBA exists to unite and establish analysis standards. Is there a professional association which unites and develops standards for the testing professional? I would suggest that is the ISTQB. That the ISTQB is the exact analog of those. So in fact, if you look at the leading certifications, PMI is first, ITIL is second, and ISTQB is third, way, way, way beyond IIBA, which I believe has got like 10,000 certificates or 20,000 certificates or something like that. I don't know the exact number. You can check their website, but certainly ISTQB is the testing analog of PMI in many ways, though we operate, I would say, differently. It's a federal organization, relies more on the different national boards, and is certainly is very transparent. The ISTQB is in its operations. Jordan asks, is it essential to have a background in project management to be successful in a testing career? If you want to become a test manager, there are certain things you're going to have to know about project management. So I wouldn't necessarily say that you need to have a background in it, but it would be very smart to at least self-study on project management and make sure that you know project management essentials if that's what you aspire to. the way I learned it was I did self-study. I read a few books on project management, and that was enough. I know other test managers who actually went to the point of getting PMI certified so that they were full-fledged project managers, with the skills and knowledge that any professional project manager would have. It's a lot of test management is just project management, basic project management stuff, creating work breakdown structures and dealing with resources and dealing with people issues. And so you'd be serving yourself well to have that skill set if where you're looking to go is into test management. Travis says, not sure if you addressed this as I'm late joining the webinar. What qualifications do most companies look for in hiring a QA analyst? For example, I have 11 years of experience in QA testing, 6 years as a business analyst, and 1.5 years as a project manager with help desk management and software training experience as well. Well, then you would seem to be extremely well qualified to be a senior test engineer or a test lead or test manager. You have broad experience. Usually skills that I look for in a tester are understanding the business domain, the business problem to be solved, understanding testing, and a good understanding of the technology. And if I'm looking at a test manager, then I would also look for that person to have project management background. Now, one of the things that does happen sometimes is that people find that they think they have 5 years of experience in testing, but they actually have 1 year of experience 5 times, meaning that they haven't actually learned much after their first year. So you have to be, you need to do a careful evaluation of where you are in terms of your skill set to really decide what you need next, what you're missing. I would also say, ISTQB program has been a big help to a lot of people. So, if you haven't already gone through that certification, I would say, given your experience level, at least the foundation and the advanced test analyst would be appropriate, and possibly also the advanced test manager if that's where you're looking to go. Lloyd says, other than certification, what do you consider some of the best training and teaching resources for testers? Colleges, online courses? Colleges, there are a few, like Florida Institute of Technology, where there is actually coursework on testing. But there's not a lot. So I would say, you can go online courses, you can go on-site courses, or you can, as you mentioned, do the certification. There's plenty of non-certification training out there as well that's relevant. So, this is something that my own company does. Of course, there are plenty of other companies out there. You got a wide variety of options. Also, I would say there are some good books out there. There are some not so good books out there as well, so you need to be a little choosy. But there are good books. A lot of people who are sort of regulars on the speaking circuit, such as myself, have active Twitter, Facebook, or blog pages that you can follow and get some sort of mini training, if you will, mini helpful hints. So, those I think would be good resources. At this point, we're really where you have to start filtering, and 10 years ago, well, maybe more like 15 years ago, if you wanted to read a book on software testing, it was pretty obvious that was going to include Meyer's book, The Art of Software Testing, and Beiser's, one or two of Beiser's books, Software Test Techniques or Software System Testing and Quality Assurance, maybe Hetzel's book, and that was kind of it. There was like a core of about 4 books that you can point to and go, yeah, that's the canon there, as it were. now there's a lot more stuff out there, and it's less mediated, if you will, and so you got to be more choosy about where you spend your time, because there's plenty of ideas out there about testing, and some of them are great, but some of them are really bad. So you have to make sure you don't end up imbibing silliness. Jesus says, can you share source or more information on DoD studies of 800% ROI? That will be for testing. Do a web search for David Rico, R-I-C-O is the last name, and throw in Department of Defense study or something like that. I think you'll be able to find it. It is online. Alma asks, I would like to know the number of people certified at basic or foundation level and the advanced level. Is advanced growing up more than basic? What we are seeing now in the mature markets is that the uptake rate is about 25%, or the conversion rate about 25%, meaning that if you had 10,000 people go through the foundation, you'd have 2,500 go through the advanced, and it does seem to be increasing. So we hope that the steady state will be that about 50% of people who go through the foundation then end up proceeding on to one or more of the advanced levels, and we are seeing a trend towards that. A lot of markets are not yet mature, and by not being mature markets, what I mean is you have to establish a certain critical mass of foundation certified testers to create enough of a local ecosystem, if you will, local market, to support someone or some group of companies coming in and providing the advanced training that would support the certification. Because if it's too small of a group, then the supply of possible customers is very small as compared to the foundation. So it does take a while. Tammy asks, what type of training do you recommend? Well, I think I just covered that pretty well. The thing that I would add to it is, I am partial to the ISTQB program, as has been clear, and so training through the ISTQB program, I think, is something that helps give you a good understanding of the software testing best practices. Even if you don't take training or take the exam, I would encourage you to read the foundation and advanced syllabi, because there's a lot of good ideas in there. Chris says, I've been in QA close to 20 years. Any suggestions for taking the ISTQB certification exam? Is working in the business a while a hindrance to taking the exam? What percentage of certified testers have been in the profession a while versus newbies? What are your thoughts on the software testing issues with the Affordable Care Act / Obamacare? How would you have handled the situation? So we got a bunch of questions there. Let me take them here. First, about the ISTQB. It is the case that people who have been in software testing a while sometimes struggle a bit with the terminology changes that are in the ISTQB program. So there is a standardized glossary that is put forth, and the reason that you have to have that is, in order to make the exams work, you have to have agreed upon definitions of terms. Certainly, if you want to use different terms in your own day-to-day work, I don't think that there's any problem with that at all, just as long as everybody's using the same terms. But that's the thing that you're likely to struggle with. And you'll probably find that as you go through the various levels, that some things you knew from doing them, but other things you didn't know, that there were maybe some holes in your knowledge. So that'll be one of the benefits that you'll get out of it. As far as the percentage of experience versus newbies going through the certification, I mean, it's definitely a much higher percentage of experienced people going through it, at least in the U.S. market. More mature markets. The growing economies, like, for example, in Malaysia and India and so forth, it is, I think, more typical for people to go straight out of college and through the certification before they start their first job. But that's not so true here in North America or in the more developed economies. Now, as far as the Affordable Care Act, healthcare.gov, Obamacare, whatever label we want to hang on it, that is clearly a complete project management disaster. The idea that something that would be in development for 3 years and then undergo a total of 2 weeks of performance testing is just software engineering malpractice. There's just no other way to put it. It's just incredibly bad. Anybody who's been involved in software engineering for any length of time, getting involved in that thing, I don't understand why there wasn't some sort of whistleblowing going on, earlier. Though I actually do remember hearing back last year that there were rumors going around in 2012 that, it's not going to be ready in time, and there are problems with the website, and project's not going well. I think it would have been nice if the media had paid a little more attention to that. They tend to be all focused on, the circus of the moment. But I mean, surely, if you've been in this business 20 years, Chris, I know that you've probably been on some projects. I know I've been on projects like that where you can see the train wreck coming from months away. And it's unfortunate that somehow or another it didn't get the amount of attention it's getting now way back then, because then the disaster was avoidable. As far as current representations of this fellow who's in charge right now saying it's going to be done by the end of November, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? I mean, because that's the only politically acceptable answer. But come the end of November, I'd be willing to bet dinner anywhere in San Antonio that they are not done, or that if they're quote unquote done, they have changed the definition of done to mean more than 6 people can be on it at once. It is a complete disaster. The idea that you and me and every other taxpayer in the United States paid over $500 million for that kind of completely ineffectual work to be done by all involved, the contractors and the government officials involved, it's just disgraceful. And the fact that nobody has lost their job yet over this is just stunning. In fact, I heard today that CGI, one of the prime contractors on this thing, is still being awarded government contracts, which is really just a mind-boggling turn of events. I mean, it's an amazing disconnect there between what would happen in the private industry versus what happens in this sort of contractor government world. This is one of those things, I'm afraid, that gives government and government programs and government contractors a really bad name, which I think is unfortunate, because I've known plenty of people in that world on both the government side and the contractor side who are very competent, diligent professionals. But these CGI guys and the folks at Health and Human Services have just really poured something smelly, something not so nice, all over themselves and their reputation. Mark says, do you see a trend in our industry moving towards software developer, engineer, and test, as Microsoft and Google seem to be? What implications would this have for non-programmers and SQA? So, yeah, I mean, Microsoft definitely has that software software engineer in test, software developer in test. One or two of our clients also have that model. It's still pretty rare, but certainly the move towards Agile methodologies and the Agile tools, as I said before, is really driving a need for a lot more technical knowledge in testers. So I would say, as I said earlier, that if you plan on working as an individual contributor in software testing for the next 10 or 12 years, say, excuse me, the next 10 or 12 years or longer, it's difficult to imagine how you do that without, A, learning how to program, and B, really mastering a lot of a significant number of the major tools that are out there, all the way from white box testing and static code analysis to black box, graphical user interface, functional testing, and performance and reliability testing. I think the trend is going to be towards the much more technically oriented test engineer. People sometimes yell at me when I say that. No, that's horrible, and it's not what should happen. Well, that's the trend that I see. Don't shoot the messenger here. This seems to be the way that things are going. Now, if you're planning on being a test manager, I would say this is entirely up to you as to whether you need to master these skills. Prior to that, I would think that gaining more skill in terms of test management and project management would be much more useful. Aishwara says, I'm a developer and would like to switch to testing. How should I go about that? Like what my first step should be? Well, that's great. So you have that technical background already. So what I would say is, look around at the job market where you are. See if you can find some open positions in testing. There are some ways that you can kind of ease into it. Since you have a developer background, I would think that one of the ways would be go to an organization that's using an Agile methodology, and because of your development background, you're going to be a strong fit there in terms of their testing. Now, you will need to pick up some skills in testing. So if you're assuming that you're brand new to it, I would say read a couple books on software testing. I've written a number of books, as I said, and there's some other good ones out there. You can do some research, find a couple good books. I would recommend taking the ISTQB Foundation certification, and since you have the background as a developer, maybe also doing the advanced technical test analyst would be a good fit too. And then that can serve as a way of kind of getting you into testing. But welcome to the field. Babatunde says, how and where can someone start as tester as a career? The basic foundation needed and certification needed. So, yeah, ISTQB Foundation certification I think is great for entry level people. I think that if you have that technical background, as I was just saying, and getting started, moving into testing in an Agile organization, or you're still kind of leveraging your developer background a little bit, makes sense. If you don't have that developer background, then it probably makes sense to try to go into the more traditional testing group, where testing is seen primarily as system testing of completed systems, and maybe focusing on functionality, that being the easier place to start. And then, as I said, get some books, some good books, and read up on it, practice the techniques, try to just really master the fundamentals. You should know the basics of the white box coverage techniques, basic black box techniques like equivalence partitioning, boundary value analysis, use case test design, decision tables, and I think I may have already said that, and state transition diagrams and how to use those. probably also pairwise techniques, how to apply pairwise techniques in domain analysis. And if you have those under your belt, you've sort of got those fundamentals. And then the main thing is just practice, practice, practice. Get out and apply them on real testing efforts. Jason says, you said this is in the pre-science, pre-math phase of engineering, meaning software engineering. What exactly do you mean by this, and do you see any changes coming with respect to this? So what I would recommend, Jason, rather than trying to recap an hour-long webinar that I did in the space of 5 minutes, is go take a look at a recorded webinar that I did called Towards True Engineering Profession, I think was the name of it. I forget the exact name, but it's a recorded webinar. I did it sometime in the last 6 months, so it's on the RBCS Digital Library, and that's where I explain, what I think is happening to move software engineering towards being a true engineering profession, and also why I think we're a long way from there at this point. Maybe 50 years at least, probably closer to 100 years. Though, things can move awfully fast. I mean, you think of aeronautical engineering, and it was a little over 100 years ago that the first working airplanes came out, and within 50 years of that, you had people going over the speed of sound in jets, and within less than 75 years of the first airplane, you had people orbiting the moon and landing on the moon and orbiting the Earth, and in fact the space shuttle program was well underway at 75 years after the Wright brothers. So things can sometimes move incredibly fast, and we could be further along than is evident. But anyway, take a look at that webinar if you're curious about it. It's a fascinating time to be in this profession. S. Walker says, there seems to be a larger focus on self-study online for testing. Have you known of any college curriculum offered for those who get more value out of the old-fashioned in-school testing? Well, we certainly do a lot of instructor-led courses, either on-site or publicly for organizations. That's a significant piece of our business. So I don't see any indication that that's going away. I think that'll continue to be an important element of how people get trained. Now that said, yeah, online e-learning is a hot new thing. The deal with that is that it's, as you seem to be pointing out by your question, the ability to maintain focus on those online courses can be challenging for people. It's difficult to study long term at a computer screen for a lot of people. So, I think that's while e-learning will continue to be important, and we do a lot of that ourselves in our business, but there's always a place for the live instructor-led course. So Mumtaz says, can we absolutely say that test automation can be done with all software applications, or do we need manual testing for some of the software applications? I think it's safe to say that we'll never reach a point where for most applications 100% of the tests can be automated. I think there's always going to need to be some amount of manual testing. And even when you have a large percentage of the tests automated, you have to remember that automated testing is, when we use the phrase automated testing, I think it's kind of a misnomer, because testing consists of a lot of activities above and beyond executing tests. And even in terms of executing tests, the automated test can only do a small part of that, which is the submission of inputs and other stimuli, the capture of the actual results, the comparison of the expected results against the actual results, and logging that comparison. All the other aspects, interpretation of the results, reporting of defects, setting up test environments, all of these things remain manual activities to a large extent. And, it's something that testers are going to have to continue to do. Michelle says, do you have data regarding salary ranges for software testers, both certified and non-certified? I'm afraid I do not. But I suspect that that's something that you could find on the internet without too much difficulty. The one thing to keep in mind here is that unless you are really truly able to work anywhere, just pack up and go, there's a tremendous amount of variation in terms of salary ranges. So, what you would pay for an entry-level software tester in Malaysia and what an entry-level software tester in New York City or London would get very, very different numbers. So, I would focus on looking in your local listings, if you will, the local job market. Samantha asks, what is the industry standard of QA testing hours based on engineering or development hours? I've heard that QA is 20% of the entire project estimate. I've also heard QA is 50% of development hours. Just curious to understand the industry standard for software testing. Both of those numbers are kind of within shouting range of what typical numbers would be reported by, say, Capers-Jones in some of his studies. I would suggest that if you need these numbers, that you refer to his work. Estimating software costs is probably the one that's most closely aligned with what you're asking about. But yes, you're in that range. Now the thing is that the distribution changes considerably based on the type of project that you're on, and also based on the size of the project you're on. So you have to be careful with those rules of thumb, because those rules of thumb only hold for medium-sized projects. I mean, you try to apply the same things to very small projects or very large projects, different types of projects, you get different numbers. So Mark says, hi, long time no speak. Howdy, Mark. See, my question is, how will the new testing standards affect the ISTQB, meaning the ISO 29119 standard? Well, my understanding of 29119 is that and I haven't looked at it recently, but it is pretty well aligned with the ISTQB program. So what I would expect is that sometime over the next few years that we'll look at that with respect to the foundation and see if there needs to be sort of a conversion from IEEE 829 over to 29119 as the called out standard for software test documentation. In terms of process, the ISTQB program already has a very well articulated test process. So to the extent that the ISO standard deviates from that, we would probably just say, the fundamental test process is not the same as the ISO process, and we might or might not explain why we think the ISTQB process is preferable. So that's the only real implication that I see is at the foundation level. The advanced level, if you look at the new advanced syllabi, they really have moved away from pushing of these standards so heavily. So it's more about be aware of the standards that are out there and figure out how to use them, which I think is appropriate, because what we've seen with most of our clients is that standards are a source of interesting and useful, potentially useful ideas, but with the exception of organizations that are regulated, that's they're really not much more than that. Let's see. Manoj asks, what are the career paths that testers can change into? For example, can they move as a business analyst or any other you recommend? Well, if you've got strong enough technical skills, you could move into development. Certainly, if you're focused on the business domain, you could move into doing business analysis. If you go up from the test manager track, you could maybe transition over to being a project manager or even the development manager potentially. So, I think that there are certainly a lot of different ways you can go depending on how you come at it. Natalie asks, what is your opinion regarding the market of the testing services for developers? Is it more actual for USA or worldwide? Is there enough space on this market for new players? So testing services, it's a big market. Some of the industry analysts claim that it's growing very fast, but not all of those analyses are unbiased. So, for example, NASCOM did a study a few years back where they were showing rapid software testing growth, but they're a software services oriented organization. But it does seem to be growing. It's just hard to know what the rate is. Is there space for new players? Oh, well, certainly there's always room for, boutique operations that are very much focused on particular markets or particular industries or something like that. But, if you look at the majors now, the Capgemini, Sogeti, Accenture, Amdocs, companies like that, the large companies, they're extremely well established. They have a lot of infrastructure, a lot of people available to them. That market, the software testing service provider market, matured very, very quickly, and it's probably something that if you aspire to be a major player in that market as opposed to a boutique operation, that's probably not so realistic. I mean, even organizations that were kind of on track to be fairly significant players in small markets end up getting snapped up by their larger competitors. I'm thinking of, for example, New Solutions down in Australia, which was acquired, I believe, by Sogeti. So, that you could aspire to that, but it's a tough market. Manoj says, I see many certifications under QAI, like CAST, CSTE, etc. So when compared to ISTQB, which one has more value in the IT industry? Well, I think that the answer there is clear, that to my understanding, QAI has something like 60, 70,000 certificates issued, and they've been in operation for over 20 years. The ISTQB, in a little over 10 years, has 300,000 and growing, and is, as I mentioned before, the third leading certificate program in the world, right after PMI and ITIL. So, I mean, the market has clearly spoken here, and I think it would be unwise to go and get one of these legacy QAI certifications when the market is saying, very loudly through where its training and exam dollars are going, that ISTQB is the wave of the future. Brent says, I work at a medical device company with actual real-life BSCS developers. I wrongly assumed that they were taught SDLC in college. If software quality is really important, why are there no curricula for software quality and testing? I assume by BSCS you mean Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. developers. So when I got my computer science and engineering degree at UCLA, and admittedly that was in the 80s, so it was a while ago, but I don't think things have changed all that much. And I had one course on software engineering where we spent one day out of that 10-week course talking about software testing, and most of that focus was on unit testing. The discussion about system testing was something along the lines of, yeah, there are also these interesting people called software testers that will do the system testing after the unit testing is done, and they're really important, and that's why we're spending all of 15 seconds talking about them. And that was it. And that was the only place where we discussed software development life cycles. Now I assume that things are a little different now, in the sense that there's probably a little more on that, but in a lot of cases, and big universities like UCLA are going to be like this, that the professors, they have research interests, they have maybe they've got some industrial experience, but it might be kind of spotty. They're expected to publish papers and speak at conferences that are fairly academic, and so you get sort of this disconnect between what goes on in the real world on actual projects and what the typical professor is interested in and focused on and experienced with. Now, I'm making a generalization. I'm not saying that all academics are totally disconnected from reality, but the ivory tower stereotype or cliche is a cliche because there is some truth in it. So yeah, I mean, this is another sort of disconnect between software engineering as a true engineering practice and where we are now. I just think it's problematic. Why isn't there the focus? I mean, should there be? Certainly there should be, but I think you have to take it as a given that there's probably not at this point in time. Mark says, thanks for your response, Rex. You are quite welcome. Let's see. Bill says, it would be nice if top management understood that testing is so much more than mere execution of tests. Their bias towards considering automation of testing as a magical cost cutter might be tempered with reality. Anecdotal observation. I've been a developer and a tester and a manager of developers and testers for several decades, and will join any chorus singing that only a small fraction of what testers do is test execution. Indeed. Yeah, the part of the problem that we have in software testing is this perception that we are what economists would call a regrettable necessity. So regrettable necessities are things like firemen, for example, which, in a perfect world, houses wouldn't catch fire. You wouldn't need firemen. Policemen are a regrettable necessity in economic terms. Military budgets are regrettable necessities. That is the way that people see software testing, and to some extent that's not inaccurate, because in a perfect world, developers and others, business analysts and so forth, would be able to create perfect work products, and there would be no defects in them. But we don't live in that world. So, no one in their right mind would suggest that because in a perfect world people wouldn't commit crimes, and therefore we wouldn't need policemen, therefore we should just get rid of the policemen. And it's not as if the policemen are causing crime any more than software testers are causing defects. Now, in the long run, once software engineering becomes a true form of engineering, yeah, I expect that the need for testers will reduce. But that's a ways off, and this idea that we're going to balance the project budget on the back of the software testing team is a extremely unwise move, as can be demonstrated with cost to quality analysis. Erling says, thanks again for valuable insights and deep experiences. Hello from Washington, D.C. Hello to you, Erling. Let's see. I think we're pretty much out of time here. Got questions about PDUs and where to get more information. Basically, you're going to get an email on the PDUs, and for more information, just go to the RBCS website, go to the Basic, Advanced, and Digital Libraries. So to close the session, a little bit more about our resources. You got the free webinars once a month. So check our website, and you can sign up there. If you want a special webinar presentation for your company only of this webinar or on any other topic related to software testing, contact us at info@rbcs-us.com or via our website. If you don't already get our free newsletter, sign up at rbcs-us.com. This will get you valuable discounts on consulting and training services and a regular newsletter with a featured article on testing and quality and news about what we're up to. We are on Twitter at RBCS and also on Facebook, RBCS-INC. I'm pretty active on Twitter. I sort of decided to do that more over my blog because it's easier for me. So I haven't done a whole lot on the blog lately. I might get back to it later. Do check your email over the next couple days. You could be the lucky winner of a free e-learning course. Remember to go to the RBCS resources pages, the Basic Library, Advanced Library, and Digital Library. Digital Library has recordings of these webinars. So if you missed one or if you want to direct a coworker to one, go there. Podcasts are available via iTunes or on our RSS feed on our website, or you can subscribe to the RBCS channel on YouTube. We offer these free resources as a services to the software testing community because at RBCS we are a not-just-for-profit company. This concludes the webinar. Thanks for everyone for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you at future webinars.